When I need answers about anything to do with personal growth, I go straight to my mom and my aunt. Here they are, Priscilla Babin and Tina Gilliatt with the Sister Sauce.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Sister Sauce for
Hello.
episode 12. I'm here, Priscilla Babin, and I got my sister, Tina Goya, and we're ready to share some sauce.
Oh, yeah. We got the sauce. I can't believe it's episode 12 already.
I know.
We're going to say that every week. I can't believe
Yeah.
it's episode 13. I can't believe it's episode 14.
I can't believe it's episode 3021.
Woo! And in my
Oh,
numbering system, I have 001, 002. I should have made it 3 zeros, huh? Because surely we're going to have over 1,000 episodes. We'll have to
surely.
have some kind of party then.
Yeah, we'll start renumbering.
Maybe when we get to 100, we can have a party. Because we learned last week that we need to celebrate
Yes,
interim milestones. So
small victories. We're celebrating. I got my hair cut.
oh yes,
My
and
head nails
I'm wearing my blessing bracelet today. Yes, we can celebrate those things.
Yay. You got some hot sauce today, T?
I do. I do. My hot sauce today is about being hot. And I don't mean temperature wise. I mean being hot in an angry sort of way. So, you know that I'm a TikTok fan and I look at a lot of TikToks and the reels on Facebook and on Insta. And I see all of these videos of people who are so angry about things. And don't get me wrong, I have my moments where I'm so angry I want to blow up, mostly at medical insurance companies and doctors' offices. But yeah, there are some things that can make Tina mad. Some people may not believe that, but others have witnessed it. I'm sorry, y'all. But my point is that so many people are so mad about the slightest little things. And I saw one of my friends posted the other day that somebody unfriended her because she was rooting for a different football team than them in the game that weekend.
Wow.
And my friend does not live in Louisiana, but she's from Louisiana, and I know she's a real LSU fan. So it probably had something to do with that. I'm not sure, but yeah, I just was shocked. She said this person unfriended me and blocked me all because I was rooting for a different football team than them. And I said that's really sad that when you're that angry over a game, and people get angry so easily now.
Mm.
And so my hot sauce advice is that if you're one of those people that get angry over every little thing, maybe you need to seek help because that really is a sign that there's something else wrong. Maybe you're surrounding yourself with the wrong people. Maybe you are just not focusing on the right things in your life. Priscilla sent me a graphic the other day or a screenshot of a post where these people were talking about a girl that they went to high school with, and she used to click a clicker every time she thought of something happy or something made her laugh. And she believed it was training her brain to be positive and to focus more on being happy. And I loved that. I loved it. It's something that I have always tried to do. I've always tried to be positive. When I was younger, I was way better at it. I think I've gotten old and cranky a little bit, but I
Me
like the
too.
whole idea of being positive about
Mhm.
everything and not letting things get to you. Hormones have a lot to do with it though, so I blame menopause for some of my anger, but you can only blame physical and your other things, your environment and all that so much. At some point you have to take responsibility for your own outbursts and anger, and you need to get help. And that's what my
Mhm.
hot sauce is today. If you're that angry all the time, you need to seek help, especially if you take that anger out on other people, because
Yeah.
that's toxic. And I have done that on occasion and had to go back and apologize. And I'm thankful I haven't done it on a regular basis, but I've had my moments.
Mm. I was thinking about that when you're saying we don't have to react to everything, you know?
Yeah,
And
very true.
it's interesting because what I have planned later for my sauce for thought comes from inspired by something I heard this morning when I was listening to another podcast. And on that podcast also they were talking about fake news and how different outlets will take something and twist it so that they can use it for their news source or whatever. And
Yeah.
they will publish it in such a way to incite moral outrage in people, you know,
Yeah,
and people react to it without, double checking, vetting it to see if it's accurate and even just something somebody might post, you might read it and interpret it a completely different way than the person did who posted it. It might just be a few words or something.
it's true.
And people get completely outraged and offended instead of just saying, well, that's just their opinion, or
Very true.
that might not mean what I think it means, and moving on with their life. And it's like stress you put in yourself, that anger, and you'd stew in it probably, if you were one of those people who gets really upset, you might stew on it for a while, and that's more stress. And because if you've been listening, stress is bad for you. We told y'all.
It's true. You made me think of what I think I mentioned it on the stress podcast, or I might have said it somewhere else. One of the things that I've always said is if it hurts, don't do it. And that goes for the anger kind of stuff too. If, you break up with somebody and you're angry with them, don't keep writing down all the reasons you're angry with them, unless you plan on writing those down and throwing them in the fire and forgetting about it, because it's like you said, you're stewing on stuff, and it's not healthy, it's not good. Seek help if you need to. Yeah. And I agree with you 100% about misinterpreting things that are said. I think I'm covering my microphone with my papers again. I agree with you 100% about that. It's so important to make sure you understand what people are saying. And if you have to ask them, what do you mean by this? Do it, because you don't want to misinterpret and blow up over nothing. And honestly, even if they meant what you thought they meant, just move on. You don't have to react and respond to everything. And I'm not just talking about on social media.
Yep. Amen.
Amen.
Good job.
Wow. We have a good topic today. It's interesting. It's a little unusual for us. It's not one of our typical topics, but we found out that CTE month is coming up in February. CTE stands for Career and Technical Education. And if you're not familiar with career and technical education, it's exactly what it sounds. It's high school students and even college students being educated to a point that they focus on career specific goals. So, for example, high schools offer some very career specific classes. I know that Belle Chase High School years ago, when we had gone for my daughter to an open house that featured some of their curriculum, they offered classes in forensic science. And I thought that was so interesting. And Olivia said, "Do I have to see blood?" And I said, "I'm sure that you do." And she said, "No, thank you. Let's move on." But but so you've heard about a lot of schools offering STEM classes. It's sort of along the lines of that, but this is just very career specific classes. And here in Chalmette, there are some specific classes that are offered at the high school that relate to what we have in our community. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But just in general, CTE is basically educating students early, beginning in high school and sometimes in middle school, toward career aspirations. And I don't know about you, Priscilla, but most of the time when you talk to little kids and you ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? They are very general responses. Most
Mhm.
little boys want to be a firefighter or a policeman or
Mhm.
a doctor or a lawyer, but you don't ever hear a little girl or a little boy or a little person say, I want to be a film editor,
Right. It's not specific.
right?
Uh-huh.
Kids, and I think part of that is because kids are not exposed to it. And I believe very strongly that CTE is a way to expose young people to all these different careers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I remember being a young person a long time ago. And, like if you go back and you look through, Mom had this book that she had for me that you could write in, who were my friends, who, what did I want to be when I grow up for each grade level. And it was like a nurse, in the most like a teacher, uh, um, I don't know what else. Those were the two top ones I said a lot, but there was one year I said an interior designer, and that was
Oh,
probably the most in-depth I got.
yeah, and that
Like,
was
that
probably
was,
when I was in college taking interior design
yeah,
classes because
I
you wanted
think
to
it
be like
was.
your big sister. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I always, when I was a little girl, I always wanted to be a teacher, or what were the other things? A teacher, a choir director, things that I knew, right? I went to
Mhm.
church. And so when I played, I didn't play dolls, I played church, I played school. I was the choir director, I was the pastor, but I never would have thought to aspiring to certain careers because I never knew they were available to me. For example, I loved to sing when I was growing up, but in my mind, being a famous singer was not attainable. And to me, there was nothing below that. So I never would have thought maybe I could be a music teacher in a school, or
Mm.
maybe I could be a choir director at a church. I didn't think of those types of careers. And I think it's because we either are led to believe that that's a rare thing. I remember Mom always wanted to encourage me to write. She said, you have a gift with writing. Same for you, I'm sure, because you were an excellent writer or an excellent writer. But Mom would encourage me in that direction. And I always thought the only way to make money at it is to be a journalist. And I
Mm.
didn't want to work for a newspaper. I don't know why I didn't want to, but that just turned me off completely.
Mm.
The thought of working for a newspaper and being a journalist in that way. And then when I was older and I was taking college classes where I was already working and I was taking college classes at night, I thought about going to school for communication and becoming a news reporter like on TV. But my company that I worked for would not pay for that degree program. And so I went for what they would pay for, which was management, interestingly
Mm.
enough. So I
Yeah.
definitely would, if I had any advice for people, I would say, think about what you love and what you enjoy and go for that.
Yeah. People don't know all what's out there. Like my two oldest being librarians, when I was a kid, I think being a librarian appealed to me, but I never realized there's so many different kinds of librarians and things. Like one of my oldest daughter's friends um was working as a librarian for an opera
Oh, wow.
because that's a thing that exists. They need somebody to take care of all their sheet
Catalog
music
their music. Yeah,
uh-huh,
that makes
and all of
sense.
that
Yeah.
stuff. And that's a real job. And that's
Yeah.
really cool. And so, you know, those are things, little niche things. I think you didn't want to be a journalist because you already could see how one-sided it was, depending on what
Probably so.
newspaper or periodical you were working
Never
for.
know. I could have been like I don't know. I don't want to, there's none that I want to name because I don't like any of them. Never mind.
Yeah. Well, we're going to share a few facts from a website. It's acteonline.org, and we're going to share the link in our show notes so you guys can see it. But as of February of 2022, I almost said last year. We're in
Ooh,
24 now.
it's almost 2 years ago.
Yeah, so almost 2 years ago, 92% of high school students and 69% of college and adult students are engaged in CTE, learning skills in the classroom and on the job. That's pretty cool.
Wow, that is cool. That's a lot. 92%. Wow. That's a lot. CTE is delivered at comprehensive and CTE dedicated high schools. So it's different, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. It's different at different high schools and in different states. It's also delivered at magnet schools, area technical centers, community and technical colleges, and some four-year universities.
CTE students earn industry certifications and licenses and post-secondary certificates, associate's degrees, and even bachelor's degrees and higher, which
Yeah.
is cool.
That is really cool, yes. And CTE associate degrees can pay $10,000 more a year than associate degrees in other fields. So very specific career-oriented associate degrees will pay more, $10,000 more than just a basic associate's degree. And they can even pay more than bachelor's degree, which will limit your student debt if you think about it. If you're going for a very specific associate degree, that's less time you're in school, it's less student loans you have to pay, and probably more affordable colleges that are offering them.
That's neat.
It is.
Thinking for the future for my kids, although
I know. And yeah, Olivia's about to graduate and we're going to have to start paying student loans back. Yikes. That's the bad thing about your kids graduating. You're like, come on, graduate. Oh, wait, student loans. Never mind.
Yeah. CTE is the answer to the nation's projected deficit of 6.5 million skilled workers, including infrastructure, healthcare, and manufacturing workforce shortages. So that's a definite positive, nationally speaking.
It's one of the reasons that states started focusing on CTE and also STEM, because there were career crises with people not being trained in the fields they needed to go in. I mean, we found out that with COVID, the shortage of nurses, remember that? And they were offering bonus. I have several friends that went to nursing school after COVID because they had the opportunity to go and get bonus, hiring bonuses or whatever they call it. Yeah. So I said we would talk about the way it works in different states. Obviously, we're not going to talk about each state and how it works different in that state, but I just wanted to share that it is different in each state. And so you need to look at the Department of Education website in your state if you want to learn more about how CTE works in your state. In Louisiana, we don't call it CTE. It is labeled as CTE, but the program is called Jumpstart. And you can learn all about Louisiana's Jumpstart program on louisianabelieves.com, which is the Louisiana Department of Education website. And I can share with you that Jumpstart, while it hasn't always been called Jumpstart, has been around for a very long time. When I was in high school, and we're talking about 1976, 77, I graduated in 79. I was a junior in high school in 1977. Is that right? 77, 78. Yes, 77, 78. I was a junior in high school. And I actually went to school at high school in the morning at Kennedy High School in New Orleans. And in the afternoon, I went to Delgado. It was a little different back then. It wasn't quite as focused. The whole point of it, which I was saying to Priscilla earlier, might have been the reason they called it Jumpstart, was because it was to give you a jump start on your college credits, but you would also earn high school credits while you were in college. So, for example, I would go to Kennedy in the morning and I would take 3 classes, which I got credit for at Kennedy. I would go to Delgado in the afternoon and I was taking 3 or 4 classes at Delgado in the afternoons, and I was earning college credit, but I was also getting high school credits for each one of those courses that I took at Delgado in the afternoon. So it was a double advantage. I got double the points for those and double the credits. Now, back when I was in it, you weren't as focused as you are now on a specific career. You could take any kind of classes you wanted. You didn't have to necessarily declare a major. You didn't have to take courses that were in your curriculum. I did declare the major of interior design. And so I was still in high school and had 21 hours of interior design classes by the time I graduated from high school, and also had made the decision that that was not the career for me. And it was interesting because Priscilla and I both, as adults now, recognize that neither one of us knew what we wanted to do when we grew up until we were very grown up. And it was a little late to start over again, but we did anyway. And so that was one of the benefits of my going to Delgado. Otherwise, I would have graduated from high school in 79 and then pursued a degree in interior design, and probably would have been broke and living on my own and deciding to just quit altogether. But I was still at home, and my mom was able to guide me and say, well, if you don't want to do interior design, take other classes that you can use towards something else when you do decide. And so then I started taking general studies classes that I could use toward other degrees, and eventually got a degree in what? Management, which I don't necessarily do anything with, but that's a whole nother ball of wax.
I like the way you said that we were very grown up. I'm going to use that from now on. I'm going to stop calling myself old. I'm just going to say,
we're very grown up, extremely grown up in my case.
Like last night when my kids wanted to sit on the floor to play Uno, and I said, I'm too old to sit on the floor. I should have said, I can't sit on the floor. I am very grown up. I ended up sitting on the floor on a very large pile of blankets, though.
Oh.
You got to work with it, I guess. Well, we have some different career clusters, which is groupings of types of careers. And we get this from careertech.org. The National Career Cluster Framework tells us these different clusters of careers. It's
alliterative, career clusters.
Yes. So that's exciting. Well, the clusters aren't, but the words career clusters. We like it. But this is just how they organize the different careers, and there's 16 clusters or categories. I'm just going to run through them. Let's see. We have agriculture, food, and natural resources. Architecture and construction. That's the next one. The next one is arts, AV technology, and communications. The next one is a business management and administration. Then there's education and training. Then we have finance is its own cluster. Then government and public administration. The next is health and science. Then hospitality and tourism. And then there's human services. Making faces. You guys who are listening to the podcast can't see me making faces on the ones where I score high in. The next one is information technology. Then we have law, public safety, corrections, and security. So you guys are probably already picturing what different careers fall under these as they're listed. Manufacturing is one. Then marketing. Then we have science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That's all one together. And then transportation, distribution, and logistics. So each one of those clusters breaks down into various pathways or careers. For example, arts, AV technology, and communication includes pathways for AV technology and film, which is what Clover wants to do, printing technology, visual arts, performing arts, journalism and broadcasting, and telecommunications. So that's pretty broad. It's generally for creative types, but it's technology too. So,
Mhm.
so it's got a little different flavors in it. And now we have a guest. I don't know if you can see her. She's in the blur.
Oh no, she's in the
There's a
blur. Yeah.
right
Lady
there's
Diana.
there she is. The cat has entered the frame. Lori cat.
One of the things that, um, young people, when they're trying to decide what they want to do, and you and Clover and I talked about this a little last week. I don't remember if it was during the podcast or after, but I was saying how when I was in high school, there was no like career assessment that you could take. And so basically, our counselors would say, what do you want to do when you leave school? And they would go back and look at the standardized tests, which are not Idaho tests, as I said last week, they were Iowa tests. I was watching the video back as I was editing, and I was like, did I just say Idaho instead of Iowa? But anyway, all those I states. But I um, I didn't have the benefit, and you probably didn't either, that the kids today have, in that they're more exposed to the careers. And I'm thankful to CTE for that. Um, when I mentioned last week that when I went back to school to get my master's, this was what I focused on: career and technical education, mainly because I knew that I wanted to teach at the university level, and it was an interesting education path you could take for the master's of ed. But it was really fascinating to me because I didn't have this growing up, even though I went through the cooperative education program with Delgado and Kennedy High School. It wasn't career focused the way it is now. And I love that. And one of the things that we studied in school was we would watch all these videos. And I know the guy's name is going to escape me now, but he's the one that does the show and the videos about the dirty jobs. Do you know what I'm
Oh,
talking
Mike
about?
Rowe.
Mike Rowe, thank you. Mike Rowe is a huge advocate for CTE. And one of the reasons he does all the videos he does is because he wants people to be aware that no matter what occupation you choose, in some way, it's going to benefit the community and the people around you. And he's trying to discourage people from thinking that only lowly people will pick up the garbage. I can tell you for a fact that I appreciate the men and the women who drive those garbage trucks and pick up my garbage on a regular basis, because without them, it would be a disaster. My house would not smell so lovely.
We have a situation right now where they're changing our garbage service and our recycling service. So extra appreciation this week.
Oh, for sure. And, so many careers are looked down upon that are in these fields that are the dirty jobs. But we need people in these fields. And so why should they be lower paid? They should be higher paid because it's a dirty job and nobody wants to do it, right? And so I'm all for recognizing that and working through those issues. And I don't know what the answers are, but I'm thankful for people who are investigating it and giving those people their due, because we need people in all these different areas. But so if you're a young person and you're thinking, what do I want to do when I grow up? And you have no clue, and you're getting close to high school age, now is the time to start thinking about that, especially if you're in middle school. And some young people seem to know right away what they want, but others will go to school and graduate and then decide that, like us, that what they graduated in, what career path they graduated in, is not necessarily where they want to go. And you need to know that there is flexibility for you and that you can change your mind, but you can get help. And I've emphasized this to my kids: you got to do what you love. Livia was a philosophy major in college for the first 4 semesters. And I kept saying, why? Why? I know your philosophy interests you, but what are you going to do with that? And she was just very passionate about philosophy because she had a philosophy teacher who was incredibly kind to her. And I think that is what helped her. It was her Latin teacher was also the president or the advisor for the philosophy club. And I think that's what encouraged Livia to go into philosophy, but she's so talented with art. And it wasn't until she was like 5 or 6 semesters in that we finally convinced her to change her major to art. And then it delayed her graduation by 2 years. She had to practically start over again with her classes, but I'm thankful. But I was talking to a friend of mine who has a dual degree in philosophy and I want to say English, but I'm not positive. But she was saying that companies will hire people that have a strong philosophy background because they like the power of thinking and the innovative ideas that philosophers have, basically. And so philosophy is a good thing to study, but you got to find your emphasis and figure out what you're going to do with it. So if you don't know what you're going to do, there are some helpful assessments that you can take. And Priscilla and I, and Clover, who is our young reporter that you remember from last week, all 3 of us took 2 different assessments. We wanted to have 2 different ideas. We took one that's on the Minnesota State website, and it's very common. That same test is on other state websites as well as a couple of the career websites. But it's a real quick one that you can take. And I found it not as detailed. I'm sure you saw the same thing, Priscilla.
Yeah.
That one was real quick and real. I just didn't feel like it really got to know me, right? It made decisions about me. And maybe that's why I scored a little differently. And then on the other side of it, there was a one that you could print out. I think Clover actually did hers online or did theirs online some kind of way.
I think they just can see better than us.
Maybe there was a way to, yes, we printed ours. Priscilla and I printed ours and sat at breakfast the other day working on it. But Clover took theirs and did it online. And I'm sure you can do it online some kind of way or just calculate your scores anyway.
I think that they just did it, like used it as a editable PDF,
PDF.
or write on and wrote on it, like drew on it on their tablet.
Yeah.
So
I gotcha.
do that.
So we're going to share our results with you. Do you have Clover's in front of you?
I can pull them up.
Okay, I was trying to find it too as well. While you're doing that, though, I will share what my results were. When I took the Minnesota test, the one that we mentioned that's online and was real quick and simple, I scored the highest in the arts, audio, video, technology, and communications pathway or career cluster. The second one for me was business management and administration. Now, you guys may know that I mentioned that my bachelor's degree is in management. And then my third one was information technology. And I think that's because I answered a lot of the questions with heavy emphasis on technology, because that's what I do for my church. I'm the media director at my church, and I edit videos and I do the website and all that good stuff. Now, when Priscilla and I took the career cluster assessment survey, I scored again. My top number 1 was AV, which is audiovisual technology. And again, that's sort of related to information technology because I do a lot of that online. Then information technology was my number 2, not my number 3. It was my number 2 on that one. And third was education and training. And I think I know why. that education and training didn't show up for me in the Minnesota test. And I believe it's because I was focusing on working independently. In my older age, I enjoy my independence and don't necessarily like working as a team unless it's my sister and my lovely sister's offspring. But I am generally a person that likes to work on my own. I'm not real team oriented like I used to be. I used to be very team oriented, not so much anymore.
Yeah.
I've gotten curmudgeonly. Is that a word? I like working on my own. And I guess because so many years I worked with teams where people let me down or didn't do their part, that I've never liked. I hated team projects in school. But I think that's why in the Minnesota survey, I was answering all the questions like, I don't want to have to work with other people. And so it took education and training out for me completely. Whereas with career tech's survey, it was so much detail. And I did check boxes like I do like helping other people learn things. I mean, I'm a tutor, I do that as a side job. And so I do help. I love the feeling of having a student finally get what I am teaching them. I had a student yesterday that was doing an outline in Microsoft Word, and he was having so many problems with it, and it was just a simple thing that he needed to click on, but we had to go back and do some extra steps to fix the outline where it got messed up. And it was just, it tickled me to watch him have it click. And he knew then the steps. Okay, I have to go back and click the numbering thing and then reformat the paragraph. And it was just a few little steps that he had to click because we were going back to fix stuff he had already typed that wasn't part of the outline. And I was sitting here and I kept saying, good job, good job. And I must have said that 50 times. I thought he was going to say, shut up, Tina, just let me do it and watch me and make sure I don't screw it up. But I was so tickled that he learned how to do it so quickly and he was going back and fixing it himself. And a lot of times that's what my interactions with my students end up being. I show them how to do something and then I watch them do it on their own and succeed. And it's just really exciting. I love that kind of stuff. But so yeah, so education and training was my third. So the comparison between the two is that AV, arts, and that sort of thing were my number one on both. Information technology was my number two on the career tech one, and my number three on the Minnesota one. And then teeter-totter between education and business administration and management being the other two that I scored high in on both those tests. So interesting.
It's interesting. Well, I think it's interesting that you, me, and Clover got so many in common.
Yeah, for sure.
And it makes you wonder, is that nature or is that nurture? Or both?
Well, I mean, I think definitely we inherited creativity from mom. I mean, she's an artist and a very creative person. She was always a great writer too.
And a teacher.
Doesn't do it now, but she was, when she was younger, she wrote a lot. And yeah. And a teacher, as you said. Yeah, the teacher thing runs in our family.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Ken's family, Carolyn was a librarian, right? Or worked in a library. And you've got two librarians in your children. And yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Definitely a love of books and written word. Mine, it's funny that you said, you felt like the one didn't really get you as much, or it translated different. And I was sure when we were sitting there doing the one on the paper that it was going to come out different for me, because I felt like I was answering differently than I did the other one. And I didn't really realize why. I figured it was just whatever mood I was in, but I started thinking about it. I think I answered a little bit more friendly toward working in a group situation on the paper one. And I think it's because I had just come from having a meeting with our pastor and another parent from the youth group, and we had done such a good job working together. I think I had that in my head.
Ah,
And I think that's why I was a little bit friendlier toward those questions than I
yeah.
was when I did the first one. But I still ended up with exactly the same results for both quizzes, or however you want to call them, tests. I had exactly the same top three on both. And so mine was my number one for both tests was human services, which is people helping individuals and families meet their personal needs. So I think because I said a lot that I like helping people.
Yeah.
And, you
So it'd
know,
be like what, like a social worker or a human resources person or,
or even working in a hotel or a spa.
oh, yeah, I could see that.
Or in a school. And so, or I might work in my own home. This one says, I'm working right here.
There you go.
Yeah. And then my number two was education and training. Surprise,
Duh.
surprise. So that was one that you and I both got. And I think, let me go back and check. I'll have to go back. We'll talk about Clover's results next, but we'll have to see what they had in common with us. But my number three was arts, AV, technology, and communications. Uh-huh. So we
That's
definitely have that
funny.
one in common. So,
For sure.
which
I like
includes,
the structure. So I'll just mention that the career tech survey, the one that we printed and did, I like the structure of it because for every career cluster, it had three columns. And it basically, and you didn't know what career cluster you were in when you were checking the boxes. They were numbered. And
yeah.
then you'd go back and compare them to the numbers. So
Mhm.
it wasn't like you were predisposed to putting certain things. Like the
Right.
first column, it would ask you, like, does this describe things you like? And you would check the boxes. And then the middle column was, I like to do these things or whatever. And then the third column was, I did well in these subjects in school. And so, depending on how many boxes you checked, you came up with a total score for that career cluster. And that's how it puts you in the career cluster that you belong. But you brought up a good point, Priscilla, in that where you are in the moment. You had just come fresh off of that meeting with the youth group people and Pastor Katie, and you enjoyed that camaraderie as working as a team. So you answered the questions maybe a little differently than you would have otherwise. I also thought the same thing about me, that I answered the questions a little differently
Mhm.
when we were sitting there together writing it. And even that may have been an
Mm,
influence on me. I'm
that's
thinking,
true.
well, I answered all these team questions kind of negatively on the other
But
tests,
you and
although
I
there
are a
weren't anywhere
team,
near as
and we work
many.
great.
But then you and I were sitting there working together, and I'm thinking, well, I love working with my sister. So I
Yeah.
might have answered some of those questions a little differently, right? And so, yeah, definitely kind of cool, interesting. And maybe students need to take the test on different days and
Yeah,
then go
and
back and
over
retake them.
time, because you change. Nobody stays the same forever. I mean, a lot of people say, the leopard doesn't change its spots or whatever, but everybody evolves somewhat over time.
Sure.
You're a product of your experiences in life. So unless you're under a rock, you're not going to be the same person when you're 20, as you were when you were 15, and you won't certainly be that person anymore at 40, so life changes you. And so we have our youngest member, here are the responses for them is interesting to me because they had the same exact ones on the the online one that I had, but in a different order. Their first one, Clover's first one, was the arts, AV, and technology, which is the same as you,
Hmm.
same as Tina. And their number two was education and training. Was that your number two?
No, I didn't have
No?
education
Okay.
and training at all on the online one.
And then their number three was human services,
Oh, wow. That's
which
like
was on
you.
mine. Mm-hmm. So that one was the same, they were the same three as me on that. And then their ones for the paper one, that one was number one was arts, AV, technology, and communications again. And then human services, which was on their other one, but that was their number three. It was their number two on this one. And then their third one was hospitality and tourism, which was different. So
Interesting. Very interesting.
yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
All
And
the
so
differences.
once you take the assessment, what you can do is go back and look at the career clusters and look at the different careers and think about it. But I mean, even the 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 websites that are out there, which we're going to link in the show notes, so you can go investigate this further. Um, Even those don't describe every possible career. I mean, there are just so many careers that could be lumped under these things, right? But they give you some paths that you can follow. But I'm looking, just you mentioned hospitality and tourism, Priscilla. Under that, there's lodging, recreation, amusements, attractions,
Mm-hmm.
restaurants, food and beverage services, travel, tourism. There's so much you could be. And
Mm-hmm.
just looking at like tourism, there's a tour guide. You could work for the tourist center.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many different potential career paths you could take in these different areas. And there's a Minnesota state has a career cluster diagram on their website, which I'll also link in the show notes, that is pretty interesting to look at. And it shows all the different career fields. Like if you look at like health science technology, your immediate thought might be doctors and nurses, right? But what you don't think about is that there's also somebody that works in the lab as an infectious disease scientist or whatever. I had a friend years ago that worked at Tulane Medical Center as an infectious disease scientist. That wasn't her official title, but she would do. We used to joke about it all the time. I would always say, "Did you wash your hands before you came over?" But yeah, so super interesting stuff. I mean, the takeaway is don't jump to decide you're going to be a specific career without really thinking about your passions and investigating it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess if I had any advice for a young person is if you narrow it down and for example, that you want to work in the arts, the AV arts field, Clover's passion. Now, Clover has an interest in film editing, which and that sort of thing, production and all. And so if you're a young person and you're in a position like that, look for opportunities to maybe work as an intern for some place. Clover got real involved at Haynes High School, which is an artsy kind of school, right? It's magnet and it's focuses on the arts.
There is a lot of good support for the artsy folks, the creatives.
Yeah. And so Clover's gotten involved in plays and musical productions and Renee was in jazz band back when she was at Haynes and
all the bands.
Yeah. And so you can kind of try all of these different things and you don't necessarily have to do it at school. There are lots of opportunities for you to volunteer at other places. I remember when Livia was young, she went through a program at the aquarium where she learned how to handle the animals and do all that. And she didn't end up becoming one of the little young people, mainly because she couldn't hold the hissing cockroach long enough to pass the final exam. But she learned a lot about animals and insects and all when she was doing that. And so look for opportunities like that if you think that's your interest. I mean, we have the media team at church, and Clover and Joe have gotten real involved in helping with that. Clover's run the camera. We talked about the editing and the production system. And it's maybe not what they're interested in, but it's exposing them to things they may not have been exposed to otherwise, right?
Right now,
And
there's familiarity there.
yeah,
So when you go to another
exactly.
situation, and I've told them, I said, take every opportunity because you don't know, we've talked a lot about the show The Office, I know, and people are gonna be like,
Yeah,
not more of The Office, but one of the cool things that we've learned from reading all the books about the show and watching, different, outtakes and documentary stuff and um listen to the Office Ladies podcast. They talk so much about the technical side and what goes on behind the scenes. And you find out, that people will go in there and they'll start out just being a assistant to a cameraman, and they'll end up, they're now directing and producing because they
yes,
were given the opportunities, because they've gotten these experiences. And that was one of the nice things about Greg Daniels. He was in charge of the show and he made sure that that happened for people, that
yep,
actors got to direct and write and writers got to act and direct, and they all got to try different things, and it broadened it for everyone,
yeah,
their
yeah.
possibilities, which is so cool.
And it sounded like from, you read my mind because I was thinking about that too, because I'd never really watched any kind of behind the scenes thing or anything, but listening to the Office Ladies, that's what they talk about. They talk about all behind the scenes stuff, and they talk about location managers and prop
Mhm.
managers, and they share the details that go into it. Like, for example,
Mhm.
with the prop manager and having to, if they obviously were not filming in Scranton, but the plot of the show was all based in Scranton.
Mhm.
And so their prop manager would get things like from restaurants in Scranton sent to
Right.
them to use as props so that it would look like they actually were in Scranton.
Uh-huh.
And it was
Like
just simple things like a coffee cup with
details.
Scranton manufacturing on it or whatever.
Yeah, things in the details. And that's how I know that that's a real passion for Clover, is they'll be watching something and notice something that's in the details that is so minor,
Yeah,
that is on purpose. There's intention from it, and it gets them so excited, you know, and they really geek out about it. Like, I know one that they've mentioned for The Office is there's a scene and they're talking and they'll spot things in the background. They spotted this postcard in the background that was for a Scranton radio station, and it was, behind somebody on a bulletin board. It's like you wouldn't normally notice that, but it's there, and they intentionally put it there knowing this is a Scranton radio station, because if somebody did notice it, it would be and it wasn't like if it was an LA radio station and it had just gotten stuck up there, that would be a continuity error.
right,
So
right.
the attention to detail is important. And so those things,
Oh yeah.
you know,
And I love too, and I know that you and Clover have noticed this too. Well, they've talked about it, so it's not, we didn't even have to notice it. But on the Office Ladies podcast, they talk about how certain characters that maybe had a more prominent role in an episode would be deliberately dressed to match their role in the show for that day. So, for example, if Pam is acting more bossy or more professional or whatever, they will dress her accordingly. If she's supposed to
mhm,
be sad in the episode, they're not going to dress her in hot pink, right?
mhm,
But if she's going to be very professional and asserting her authority in some way, they might put her in a business suit for that episode. And I just thought all of those details, it's all in the details. And
mhm.
I'm like Clover, and I know you are as well. in that I geek out about all those little details and how cool it is. And it's things that we, as people that are watching a show that's on TV, never have thought about. And that's just with the AV technology and arts cluster. Can you imagine all of the other, if you've ever watched one of those CSI or one of those shows, then you know a lot of that stuff's not necessarily accurate on those shows. Like, for example, I think we mentioned it last week, where you don't get those DNA results back right away. But those shows and that technology that they're using may not be completely accurate, but it's based on things that we don't know about that they really do. Searching databases and looking at traffic cameras to find a criminal or whatever. So interesting to learn all of those details about everything. It'd be interesting to have a podcast that was dedicated toward careers, focus on a different career every week, and they could do tons of shows. It's not something I would necessarily want to do because it would take a lot of research, but you could do different careers from each cluster and focus on a different career each week. I'm sure it wouldn't interest everybody, but it would interest me.
Me too.
Fascinating stuff. Just really fascinating. So now I'm ready to start a new career. Not really. But
Don't rush into anything.
Well, this was a good topic. It was funny because when we first talked about it, I thought, how is this going to go? But it was very interesting to research a little bit and to talk about. And I enjoyed that. And I hope it helps some people out there. Maybe we'll get some high school students or middle school students that will benefit from it in some kind of way.
Or somebody
or some old people who decide to change careers, or some more grown-up people who can change careers. Really good stuff. Well, do you have any sauce for thought for this week?
I do. As I mentioned earlier, we were talking and I was saying that, about something I heard on the podcast I was listening to this morning. They also were talking about, and I don't think it was a big part of the subject. These two people were just discussing different things, and they were talking about just life and getting through, because it was recorded over a year ago when there was still some stuff going on, COVID wise and everything. And they were talking about worrying about the future and how much time, how that impacts your outlook is and how you spend your day. And it's kind of like you were talking about during our hot sauce, if you let your anger color, everything around you. But they were speaking about, the one person was saying that their boyfriend is a computer programmer. And they said if they looked to the future, to any possible thing that could go wrong in the programming later on because of other influences or other things, changes in technology or whatever, and tried to do the programming in preparation for anything that might happen, it would be their downfall, because there's too many probabilities or too many possibilities, too many variables, and so many of those things might never happen, and it just clutters everything up and makes a big mess. And you can't be like that in your real life either, worrying constantly about what if this happens, what if that happens. I mean, Shel Silverstein wrote a poem about it, for crying out loud, about the what ifs crawling inside your ear. Don't let the what ifs in your ear. You can't worry about everything. Now, we've just been sitting here talking about planning future, for career and things like that, and how you don't know, you might change your mind, you might want to start a new career, but you can't. And certainly some things are important to do your homework before you do things. If you're going to do something, you should do it right and do your homework, do your proper planning and everything. But you can't, if you spend all your time trying to decide what you're going to write your novel about, you might never write your novel. You know what I mean? You have to get started at some point, and you can't,
Right.
so you can't let worries about, getting started stop you from doing something. You should be prepared, but then go ahead, and even in just life in general, you can't prepare for everything. Prepare for what you can and live in the present. Don't spend all your time worrying about the future. So that's my sauce for thought today is don't worry so much about the future. Do the prep you need to do and then let it do its work.
I
So
like that. Yeah. And it's one of the things that I used to teach a class on leadership. And one of the things that we talked about was planning ahead, but how when you're planning ahead, you have the knowledge of the past, but you can't spend so much time looking in the rearview mirror that you run into a tree, right? So self-reflection is good, but don't let it be your downfall. And yeah, I like that. Don't worry, be happy. Well, that was awesome. Thank you so much for that. Next week, we're going to be debunking some myths. That should be interesting.
Ooh.
I don't even remember what we were thinking about when we picked that topic for next week, but I know we'll make it fun, whatever it is, right?
Yeah. You guys remember, we need questions. We need advice questions from you guys. So send
Yeah,
those in.
definitely. We need
Have a little
those. I
bit.
think that show is in mid-February that we're going to do that, where we answer questions. And they can be questions about anything. They don't have to be questions where it's a emotional issue. It can be a technical thing. We love to research. We'll research and find the answers for you if we can. So ask us whatever you want.
And you
Keep
never
it
know.
clean though.
We've done so many things. We might have some experience with something.
For real. We've had a lot of random experiences. It's so true. I'll whenever I used to go on job interviews. Now, don't get me wrong, I never went on a ton of them, but when I would go on job interviews, I would always get a kick out of how other experiences in my life would pop into those interviews. And I had such random experiences like hosting a radio show, a radio segment for a short time, and being on TV to do this, or filling in for a pastor at a church. I mean, so many random experiences. So I'm like one of those people that they say you're a jack of all trades and master of none. That's me. I've had a little bit of experience at a lot of things. Didn't get great at any of them, but I remember when we were young and I would say, Mom, I didn't inherit any of your artistic abilities. And Mom would say, but you type well. I used to think that was so funny. And of course, she would go on to say, stop it, you're a great writer and you do this and you do that. But we're always our own worst critics, right?
Oh, yeah. No
That's why
negative
we have
self-talk.
sisters to talk each other up and say how wonderful we are.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a great show, and we're looking forward to debunking some myths with you next week. But until then, make yourself a priority.
And take care of you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us. Make sure you subscribe to keep up on all the latest sauce. See you next time.